Hello everyone, I'm Eternal Flame here, and I'm here today to talk about what I think will be the key influential weakness in taking down Sukuna. Because, as me and a lot of other YouTubers actually think, on a realistic note, Sukuna should be completely unstoppable by this point, considering everything he has shown off. However, I do think there is one weakness that Sukuna has, and I'm going to get into this video, that might be the key to actually defeating Sukuna, and I think that's going to be the only possible way for them to defeat Sukuna. However, before we even get into this video, be sure to like and subscribe to like anime content like this, and let's get straight into this. Now you might be wondering, why am I saying Sukuna is completely unstoppable? Well, if you're saying that, I'm questioning if you've been reading the same JJK as everyone else has for the past several months now, because Sukuna has already displayed the ability to take out two of the strongest opponents we have ever seen, with Gojo Satoru being the strongest of the modern era, and Kashimo using a curse technique that allows him to surpass human limits, and Sukuna being able to take both of them out and seeming to be perfectly fine and healed, although I think he can't use domains right now. I'm really hoping he can't, so the Gojo fight doesn't amount to nothing, but there is still the potential that he can even use domains again. He's able to cause constant incantations, and he's able to fight with 4 arms at once, and has incredible physical strength and speed and prowess to the point where he's able to blitz someone who surpasses human limits, being Kashimo. So Sukuna is being shown as this incredibly unstoppable force, and while Yuji and Higuruma have stepped in, and are probably the best counters at the current moment in order to handle Sukuna, even then, it does feel a bit iffy on if they are going to be able to handle this on their own. Now, I just do want to explain why I think Higuruma is the best chance against Sukuna. The reason that Higuruma has the entire best chance of at least doing something against Sukuna is purely because of the confiscation ability that is granted to his domain, and not the Executioner's Sword, because I've been seeing a lot of people talk about the Executioner's Sword. I first want to talk about why that is such a terrible idea and why you shouldn't go for the Executioner's Sword, but instead go for confiscation against Sukuna. If you get the Executioner's Sword, Sukuna is still able to use his curse technique. After all, in his domain, the Executioner's Sword is a supplement for the confiscation, i.e., both of confiscation and the Executioner's Blade cannot happen at the same time. So even if Higuruma can get the instant killing sword, Sukuna will get his curse technique back, and bam, Higuruma is dead. What you want is to get confiscation on Sukuna in order to take away his curse technique. And if Higuruma figured out a way to do this through binding vows, also hopefully take away his curse energy alongside the curse technique, but that is a bit... Alright, so editing Flame here, I explained this over to one of my friends, and they ended up telling me that I was completely and absolutely wrong, that absolutely you can have confiscation and the Executioner's Sword at the same time, because of the fact that in the actual Viz translation, it looks like both are active, and this statement is one after the other, as well as the fact that it looks like Yuji does not have curse energy up to this point. More wishful thinking. Right now, the main issue with Sukuna is the fact that he has access to Cleave and Dismantle, and more importantly, the Spatial Cleave, the attack that was able to tear through Gojo. So right now, disabling his curse technique should be the main priority, but even with his curse technique disabled, it's hard to see Sukuna being beaten in this current state, even without a curse technique, because of how much of a monster Sukuna even is physically. This is not to mention the fact that Sukuna has domain amplification, which you could argue could be used to counter against the domain, or he has Hollow Wicker Basket maybe, that one's a bit more up in the air, but he does still have domain amplification nonetheless. You could also argue that those would be countered due to them being counted as an act of violence, and acts of violence is not allowed within Higuruma's domain, thus not allowing Sukuna to do so. It's also why I don't think you can actually cast a domain to clash with Higuruma's unless you clash it at the moment Higuruma opens his domain, because opening a domain might count as an act of violence. That part is all currently up in the air and speculation right now, just Higuruma is the one with the best chance to nerf Sukuna down even more for them to have a better chance against Sukuna in the future. However, that isn't the weakness that I wanted to even focus on in this video. No, the weakness that I want to focus on directly correlates to Yuji and Sukuna, and why I think this is the best advantage they have against Sukuna. I do not think this is a curse technique type of advantage or even a curse tool, or like Sukuna has some weakness to his body or anything like that. What I think the biggest weakness that is going to be exploited for Sukuna is going to be his own character and who he is as a person. Now, I know I already can tell that I might have ended up making some of you roll your eyes at the mention that the way Sukuna is going to be beaten is because of a character flaw that Sukuna has, but this is not out of character for Gege, because this is something Gege has done and incorporated into another character that he has as the strongest, and it's the reason he got sealed to begin with. Who I'm talking about is Satoru Gojo, of course. With Satoru Gojo's main and only flaw, as stated by Gege, is who he is as a person. And I think we're about to get the same case happen to Sukuna, just on the opposite side, where it's the good guys who are exploiting Sukuna's personality rather than the other way around. Now you might be wondering, what is this personality flaw that Sukuna has that they're going to exploit? Well, what I believe they're going to exploit is Sukuna's cockiness, and how Sukuna is as a person, how he treats fights, as well as his view of himself. Sukuna views himself as being on his own level. No one else can reach him. That is how he views himself. And there was something extremely interesting that he says to Kashima right before Kashima was about to pass on, which is, "The thought of needing someone else to fulfill me never crossed my mind. If I want to eat, I eat. If I see an eyesore, I kill it. And if it entertains me, I throw it a bone. I live according to my own stature. If that can't be measured or understood, that's not my problem." Now, the important part of this quote that I want to talk about is, "And if it entertains me, I throw it a bone." The reason why that is the most important part is basically him saying that if something entertains him, if something entertains him in combat, or something just entertains him in general, he throws it a bone, he lets it get stronger. That is how I interpret that statement. That is also what I believe happened in the Heian era. As I have pointed out before in the quote, where Gojo is talking about the legend of Ryomen Sukuna, the quote very much implies that Sukuna fought people, and the people got stronger as they fought him, but were not able to defeat him in the process because Sukuna was just always on another level. Furthermore, when Yuji and Higuruma arrived to the battle, he immediately says, "Just what do you think you'll be able to do, brat?" with a question mark. And while yes, this could be Sukuna mocking them, I think it actually has a double meaning of Sukuna just genuinely being curious what Yuji and Higuruma are going to even do against someone like him, considering they just watched their two strongest fighters die to Sukuna. So furthermore, I could see Sukuna just straight up treating confiscation like a game, where instead of trying to call a retrial, he is going to end up fighting Higuruma and Yuji only using curse energy reinforcement and his physical body to just treat it as a game, and show Yuji that he is better than him at hand-to-hand in physical stats, and try and beat Yuji in his own game to show Yuji that he is not even the best in that. And he could see that as potentially entertaining for him. Because Sukuna is the type of person who would set limitations on himself in order to enjoy a game, and specify what moveset he can specifically use in order to make sure it's as fun for him as possible. For example, against Jogo, he set a specific rule of, if Jogo hit him once, he would win the game and fight, basically. So I could easily see him seeing this as just a game of only using hand-to-hand and trying to win through that. But I think there is another reason that Sukuna might end up dragging this fight out and not going all out initially in this fight, and that is because Sukuna might be trying to break Yuji's soul, and he finds that even more entertaining, because while you could argue that Sukuna might see this as a game and not go all out, something we know for a fact Sukuna finds entertainment and joy in is torturing Yuji. Like, Gege comments on it that his two favorite pastimes are literally mentally torturing Yuji and eating food. That is what Sukuna enjoys doing. The entire reason he spared Mahito the first time inside of their mental domain was purely because he laughed at Yuji alongside him, and he was just like, alright, you can touch my soul once. And this is one of the few times we actually hear Sukuna sound somewhat angry and offended. Like, this is the same person who basically told Yuji his entire ideology before launching a mass waves of cleaves at him with the intention to try and kill him after quote-unquote breaking his soul until Megumi suppressed him even further. Okay, so some of you guys might be wondering, why is this the key to defeating Sukuna? If anything, it makes it sound like Sukuna is just gonna have fun toying around with them before eventually killing them. And the reason why I believe this is the key to defeating Sukuna is because I believe this is going to be basically a rerun of what happened in the Heian era, but it is actually going to work this time. The reason that I think that is because of Yuji's massive potential when it comes to growing, and the fact that I think Sukuna is going to go from wanting to see Yuji's soul break to wanting to see how far that potential ends up going for Yuji. After all, there are only around 2 or 3 characters that actually match Yuji's growth throughout JJK when it comes to how fast Yuji grows in combat. And those 3 characters are Yuta Akotsu, Sukuna himself, and Mahito, someone who Yuji just called himself and Mahito literally the same person. Though I think that's more on a symbolic level, but either way, all 4 of them have extremely high and fast rates of growth. So I could see Sukuna getting intrigued by that, and that being his undoing in his downfall. Because the biggest flaw that I think all of the strongest are going to end up having is who they are as people, and that is going to be what ends up being their defeat. After all, each time Gojo was actually defeated was because of his own character flaw. For example, when he was up against Toji, the reason that he got defeated the first time was because he believed he was the strongest and he could handle everything on his own so long as he kept his 6 eyes active, which made him extremely tired. Against the Disaster Curses, it was because of his care for people that ended up forcing him to over-exhaust himself and over-exert himself, which led him to being open for Kenjaku to arrive in Geto's body and put him in the prison realm, taking advantage and literally using his best friend to mentally trip him up. And finally, against Sukuna, the reason that he died against Sukuna was because he chose to spare Yuji rather than just executing him on the spot, allowing Sukuna to reincarnate and take over his body because of his greed and desire to recreate the world how he saw fit rather than the current Jujutsu society, as well as his desire to foster a strong opponent for himself to fight in the future, which ended up in him spawning an opponent and recreating an opponent that he couldn't even feel satisfied against, which all came as a result of Gojo's own greed and desire. Kashimo died because he wanted to fight against someone stronger than him, which resulted in him getting an opponent that was so much more massively powerful than him that as soon as they went to their true form, they were completely overwhelming Kashimo and ended him in a chapter. Both characters who were referred to as the strongest that ended up dying because of their own personality and desires, which I think is going to be the exact same for Sukuna. I think Sukuna's main flaw is going to be who he is as a person, because who he is as a person is going to allow someone to get stronger and stronger as they fight them, the more and more entertained he gets, because all that he cares about is his own entertainment, his own desires, and his own enjoyments, which is going to end up in him slowly creating something that is going to go from strong enough to entertain him to something that is actually capable of killing him because of his own actions and his own letting them get stronger and stronger as they fight against him more and more. And the final cherry on top is going to be the fact that he had the chance to kill him earlier. In chapter 214, when he was choosing to leave, he chose instead to ignore Urame so he could get a laugh out of Yuji's current face. So, it would be incredibly fitting with how each of the strongest have died that Sukuna were to also die to one of his own personality traits and mistakes he ended up making, which that mistake would be letting Yuji live to begin with and not choosing to finish him off right then and there, and always choosing to live by his own desires, his own wants, and his own goals instead. It'd also be especially fitting if he ended up dying to someone weaker than him because he was nerfed as well, and thus died to teamwork, because it would completely go against Sukuna's ideology and spit in the face, but I can live without that. However, I do think Sukuna's personality is going to be the main thing that is going to be used in order to exploit and find a way around Sukuna, because just like the 2 strongest before him, he is going to lose to his personality and his own flaws as well, because every one of the strongest have one flaw, and that is who they are as people. However, yeah, that's the main weakness that I think they're going to apply in order to actually make Sukuna lose. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be real with you guys for a sec. I didn't even realize until in the recording that Kashimo and Gojo both ended up losing because of their own personality flaws, and every single fight they lost was because of their own personality flaws. Of course, I knew Gojo's main flaw was his personality because that was something Gege has been preaching for a while, but I didn't realize just how deep it actually went into both Gojo and Kashimo and how this might actually be always been a theme for them. So if this ends up happening for Sukuna, I really wouldn't be surprised at this point either. Because, I can see this being how Gege writes it, that Sukuna's main flaw, despite all the abilities he has access to and all the powers he has, is the fact that he still is ultimately human at the end of the day. Sure, he's an ascended human, but he is still human. However, that's just my thoughts on this theory, on how they're going to defeat Sukuna, and what the key weakness of beating Sukuna is going to be. I want to hear what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I'm going to see y'all later. Peace.